Scream is a slasher movie that came out in 1996, was directed by Wes Craven, and stars David Arquette, Neve Campbell, Courteney Cox, and the very first scene of the movie actually stars Drew Barrymore. The movie is a generic slasher movie. Basically, this one teenager becomes the target of this serial killer named Ghostface. So it's your standard slasher movie, but this movie has an interesting twist in that most of the characters are fans of horror movies, so they understand the basic conventions of horror movies, the cliches: never have sex, do drugs, don't say you'll be back because you won't be back. It's a very meta horror movie. So by the time the 90s came around, the slasher genre was pretty much on its hands and knees. The 80s was its glory days, and now in the 90s it can barely walk. It's pretty much that villager in Monty Python the Holy Grail that's shouting out, "I'm not dead! I feel fine!" No, you don't, slasher genre. You'll be stone dead in a moment. So people were just basically sick of the genre because it was just so cliched and generic. So Wes Craven, who created the Nightmare on Elm Street series and Freddy Krueger, came in and decided to basically make the end-all be-all of slasher movies. It's kind of hard to say because slasher movies still got made, but it was pretty much the big statement of, here's all the cliches of a slasher movie. And it plays more like a horror comedy, but definitely has more of a horror element because the characters are aware of the situation. So, in a sense, it's not really that scary, but it is very entertaining. I saw this movie for the first time last year as a double feature with the original Friday the 13th. It has good performances, mainly because this is a slasher movie where your actors are actually somewhat recognizable. Like, Courteney Cox is in this movie, who at this point was doing Friends, so she had that going for her. And it's a little smarter than the average horror movie, because Wes Craven had a hand in creating one of the most iconic slashers of all time, Freddy Krueger. He knew the trappings. He was well familiar with the genre to poke fun at these cliches. It also has some horrific moments to it as well. It is a horror movie. There are some tense moments, and the kills are pretty good. Probably the most brutal kill is at the beginning with Drew Barrymore, who is only in the opening scene of the movie. She doesn't pop up anywhere else. The killer Ghostface is not very original. Basically, it's just a guy wearing a Grim Reaper suit with that Scream mask that you see at Spirit Halloween. But I think it does play into the idea that a slasher villain could be anyone. For example, Michael Myers' mask is just a cheap William Shatner mask painted white. So, and Jason just has a hockey mask. It's something so simple that makes it so iconic. However, with Ghostface, because it's such a generic costume and you can see it in Halloween stores, it makes the mystery of the killer even more mysterious. So I don't have much else to say about Scream as a whole. I think it's a really good horror movie, or horror comedy, and it's very smart, but I don't love it. I think mainly for two reasons. One is that I saw Scary Movie about 9 years before seeing Scream for the first time. And since Scary Movie was a spoof of Scream, I kind of knew where the story was going to end and how it was going to play out. So there weren't any real surprises for me. But Scream is a much better movie. A much, much better movie. Although, now that I've seen Scream, I have to say, who thought it would be a good idea to make a spoof out of a movie that's spoofing an entire genre or poking fun at it? Just seemed like a weird way to go. But the other reason I don't love it is because I saw Cabin in the Woods first when it came out in the theaters. And what Cabin in the Woods does is it took horror cliches and dissected them, spun it around, and gave you a new perspective on how some of the horror cliches in other horror movies could work in a very smart and comedic way. Whereas Scream just brings up a horror cliche, shows that the characters are aware of it, and that's it. It's not a bad thing, it's just Cabin in the Woods put in a little more effort. But on the whole, Scream is a movie that's definitely worth seeing in your lifetime. It's a slasher movie that I think might be more appealing for a mainstream audience. I saw it as a double feature with the original Friday the 13th, and I definitely like Scream much better as a movie. Friday the 13th, as I said, is fun to watch with your friends and make fun of, but Scream is just a better movie all around. And that's my review for Scream. Tomorrow will be the final review in my horror series, and we're going to end with my favorite zombie movie. So until then, I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on Scream, if and when you've seen it. And as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there is only one.